From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on October 28th, 2024, from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. Also happening here in South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia on October 30th is the live Lede taping in studio.
Wow.
Guys, please, it is just days away now. It's at 6 o'clock on October 30th, Wednesday. Come on down. It's free. There's going to be swag. You can meet me, Mayan Schechter, and Meg Kennard. They're going to be on the show with us. We're taping this live. We're doing it live here at South Carolina Public Radio Studios, and it's also going to be our episode of This Week in South Carolina for the week, and you could be on it in the audience. All you got to do is go to southcarolinapublicradio.org/live-lead and RSVP, because we need to know you're coming. We're going to have some food, and there will also be beverages for purchase. RSVP LIVELEDE at southcarolinapublicradio.org. We will see you October 30th at 6 p.m. That's another Lede promise.
And now for our feature presentation.
On this episode of The Lede, we are 1 week away from the election. Yes, the most pivotal election of our lives, as it always is every 4 years. We are hearing about those closing arguments to this election 2024, and we even hear more from State Election Commission Director Howie Knapp, because we had so much more. I want to share all of it with you. We have the latest on the teenager voters who have been disenfranchised by the SCDMV that failed to register them to vote. And we have a new poll on what South Carolina voters think is most important this election. And hear about the upcoming execution in our state on Friday from Victoria Hanson. And Scott Morgan has a report on early voters in York County. A lot in this podcast, guys, but not so much that we don't have room for you. 803-563-7169 is your way of talking to us, letting us know what you're thinking about. We'd love to hear from you. Give us some feedback. 803-563-7169. We are 7 days, 1 week away from the most pivotal election of our lives, as folks say. That's right, the closing arguments in the 2024 race are underway, with former President Donald Trump's packed rally at Madison Square Garden on Sunday that was eclipsed by the racist, sexist, and crude remarks made by several speakers who opened the 6-hour-long event in the blue state of New York, Trump's hometown, New York City. Vice President Kamala Harris will deliver her closing argument on the Ellipse in Washington on Tuesday evening with her vision for the future as she seeks to differentiate herself from President Joe Biden. She has been using major celebrity star power from Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce, as well as the Obamas, to drive turnout. Both campaigns continue to blitz the field ahead of November 5th as record early voting continues in key swing states and other states like the Palmetto State, where you are. In fact, in the first week of early voting in our state, the Palmetto State, we saw 735,415 ballots cast. That's an incredible amount and puts us on track to maybe hit 2.8 million or 75% voter turnout. That's what Howie Knapp was saying. Howdy, friends. Now, the current early voting total has now surpassed the 2020 early vote of 561,600. So again, not too hard to do since that was just a midterm election year, and this is a presidential election year. But also, 2022, there were some important folks on that ballot, including governor and constitutional officers. As well as everyone. Everyone's important when they're on the ballot. We get that. Now, we did have part of my interview with SC Election Commission Director Howie to Friends Knapp last Saturday from This Week in South Carolina, but we didn't bring you the whole interview because, I got to give you some more information. Now, we have Howie here talking about voter integrity concerns as well as new ballot scanners that are being used in this election. Here's me asking Howie about what he tells people when he hears conspiracy theories from folks about elections.
I understand why they're upset. I understand where their questioning is coming from. I will say what I was told and when I was in elementary school and first getting on the computer: don't believe everything you see on the internet. Your county election office and the state election commission should be your trusted source of election information. Unlike a lot of government entities, agencies, my agency and county election offices, everybody that works in these offices, or works for me, is a client of our agency. We have a vested interest in the integrity of our elections. So we do everything we can to ensure our elections are secure. I will say the physical voting system, the equipment is not connected to the internet. There's no way to hack it, regardless of what people have said on the internet. And in terms of our voting list, as we've talked about, the state is doing everything it can to ensure our voter list is as accurate as possible because this is a very important constitutionally protected right to vote.
And Howie, the agency just purchased new ballot scanners this year too. How are they doing so far? What was the need for this upgrade?
So the upgrade was kind of a necessity of needing more equipment. At the time, the vendor was not making more of our existing equipment. Mm-hmm. So in order to get more equipment, we had to actually upgrade all the equipment. So we did. We upgraded all the ballot scanners it's the most, I was going to say bigger, better, faster. It's actually a smaller scanner, but it is better, it is faster, it is more secure. But we anticipated unprecedented turnout. So we purchased a lot more ballot marking devices, which is the screen you see and you actually vote on, because ballots are long, especially in this election. Yeah. You've got 1 million offices on the ballot, and behind all those offices are all these tax referendums, which are lengthy. That means, in a normal election, a voter will spend 2 to 3 minutes voting. This election, I think we're seeing about anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes per voting session. So knowing that the choke point was going to be at the ballot marking device, the state purchased more ballot marking devices, so more people could be voting at one time. Yeah, more reason to look at your sample ballot at scvotes.gov. Yes. Giving you a little plug there. Yes. With less than a minute, Howie, I want to ask you about just your workers, your people. Obviously, it's county by county too, but there was concerns about a poll worker shortage. You have new election officials in each county in some cases, just fresh on the job there too. So are you confident in how the elections will be run this election? What more needs to be done to help retain and attract folks to this profession? I guess the first thing I would say is people, if they're skeptical about the election, which a lot are, they should put their money where their mouth is and volunteer to be a poll manager. On the flip side of that, I would say if people get upset with poll managers or get upset with the process, they need to realize that people working at the polls are their neighbors. To work in the polls that people are assigned to, you have to live in the area. So it's neighbors helping neighbors. There are some counties which fortunately do have enough poll managers, but some of the bigger counties are still in need. I'm going to give a plug to my oldest daughter, Isabel. She is a poll manager's assistant at my polling place this year because she knew there was a dire need in Richland County, and she stepped up, which is great. So it's part of being an American, and I think everybody needs to embrace that and just volunteer once for one election. I wanted to get that information out there at the start. Yes, it's important. Again, everything you need to know is on the State Election Commission's website at scvotes.gov. Check out your ballot so you know what's on it and you're ready to vote, because it is taking folks a little bit longer to cast ballots in some places because there are long tax referendums on there, penny tax and the like. So get ready to vote. Speaking of getting ready to vote, Scott Morgan with South Carolina Public Radio has this report of early voting from the campus of York Technical College.
On just the first day of early voting for the 2024 general election, 126,000 voters in South Carolina turned out. 8,900 of them lined up in York County, and almost 1,500 of those voters lined up at the Baxter M. Hood Center on the campus of York Technical College. Translation, voters are ready.
I'm ready to get it over with so I can know I've done my part. I don't have to think about it anymore, except for the worrying, but I don't have to think about doing my part anymore.
Elizabeth Wilson is expressing something everyone in this ever longer line seems to be feeling. It's time. Let's get on with it. I found that same sentiment all over York County, so Wilson is far from an outlier. But given that throughout the week, whenever I checked in on the voting line at York Tech, which never got much shorter, by the way, I didn't really see students of the college in line. So I wondered, is the presence of an early voting site on campus enough to encourage young voters to queue up?
Yeah, it does. I would appreciate that being on campus.
Maddox Nielsen is 20 years old, a student at York Tech, and voting in his first presidential election. He says he didn't actually know there was a voting site on campus, but now that he does, he wants to get over to the Hood Center. What he'll do when he gets there? Well, he's a little more on Kamala Harris's side, but only a little.
I mean, I'm excited to vote. This is my first year voting, but I'm not super invested in this year's election, so I'm kind of just like, I don't really care whichever side wins. I'm just excited to vote, just to pitch in. So.
But nobody really particularly excites you either way?
Not really. I haven't done enough research, but also just like has been a bit of a hodgepodge election campaign this year.
Gabe Hobbs is a classmate of Nielsen's. When I ask him about the early voting location on campus, he says,
Well, honestly, I didn't know that, but now I do want to go vote. I was going to wait till election day itself, but I might do some early voting. It's like they're voting right now.
Yeah, over at the Hood Center.
Okay, I'll have to do it when I get a chance.
Yeah. Hobbs, too, is 20 years old and will be voting in his first presidential election. When I ask him if he wants to tell me who he's voting for, he says,
I could give his initials. DJT.
Nielsen and Hobbs might have been unaware that York Tech is hosting an early voting site this time around, but not because the college didn't get the word out, says York Tech student Caleb Collins.
I think it definitely encouraged me to vote. I think the school pushes out stuff for us to register here and vote here, so.
College President Stacy Moore says the State Election Commission reached out to see if York Tech would be interested as a way to drum up interest in voting among young people.
We jumped on it because we wanted to be more intentional about that exact process. So we had voter registration happening and everybody talking to students about the importance of it. We have faculty from sociology and psychology and political science, all, part of that group working with students. So it's really been a way to try to do exactly what you're asking me about, is if we create an environment where we have those kinds of opportunities, can we also capitalize and maximize on that to do some educating and events and activities that would help further students in terms of their awareness of civic engagement in general.
Dr. Moore says the effort to reach out to students, some of which involved luring them to public information events with food, got several hundred young people to register and learn more about the voting process, issues, and candidates.
That was very intentional. We hope that it creates more civic engagement, opportunities for civic engagement for our students.
The only thing holding some students up could be the long lines over at the Baxter Hood Center, which are averaging about a half-hour wait at their busiest. Early voting in South Carolina ends on Saturday, November 2nd. Election Day is November 5th.
In our last episode, we mentioned that voter case involving the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles and their computer system's inability to transmit voter registration data for teenagers who are going to be 18 by Election Day. We're talking about 17,000 teenagers who would be 18 by Election Day and had applied for a driver's license. Just over 6,200 eventually registered to vote, but 1,896 checked a box to register to vote when they applied for their driver's license, and they were never registered. That case, brought by the ACLU of South Carolina, was before a Richland County judge on Friday morning. By the afternoon, Circuit Court Judge Daniel Coble denied the ACLU of South Carolina's motion for a temporary restraining order, writing, quote, "This court finds that the relief sought by the ACLU is too drastic and would likely violate the separation of powers doctrine. There is no effectual relief that this court could grant, and even if it attempted to, the relief sought would create disorder in the voting system," quote. Alan Cheney, legal director for the ACLU of South Carolina, said in a statement, quote, "Our government failed these young voters, and now the same government is making excuses rather than making things right. When it's too hard to fix becomes an acceptable reason to disenfranchise voters, we know that there's work to do. But at the ACLU of South Carolina, we're in it for the long haul," quote. Now, a decision by them to appeal is still pending. So what are South Carolinians voting on this election?
You tell me.
Well, East Carolina University, based in Greenville, North Carolina, I know, that was confusing, released a poll that found that the top issue was inflation and or the overall cost of living at 31%. That was followed by the economy in general at 24%. Of the likely voters who cited inflation/cost of living or the economy as their top issue, 66% support Trump, while 32% support Harris. Now, additional issues of top concern included border security and or immigration at 14% and abortion at 12%. So the economy, inflation, immigration, abortion, top four issues right there going into Election Day. Of those who selected border security and or immigration, Trump holds a 91% to 6% advantage over Harris. But that flips with Harris leading Trump among those who identified abortion as their top issue, 78% to 21%. You get it, right? You get it. Now, in assessing the results of the poll, Dr. Peter Francia, director of the ECU Center for Survey Research, said, quote, "A majority of voters in South Carolina are focused on economic issues. Inflation and cost of living in particular are top concerns. In this environment, Donald Trump seems on his way to winning South Carolina in 2024 by a margin similar to his victory in 2020 in the Palmetto State," quote. So Trump, again, unsurprisingly, led Harris 55 to 42 in this poll of our non-swing state. That's right. We know that we're not swinging any election here, folks. But your vote, of course, does count. Now, I will say that this poll was conducted October 18th through the 22nd with a random sample of 950 South Carolina registered voters who are likely to vote in the general election with a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. Trump won the state 55% to 43% in 2020. Where are we going to be on Election Day, folks? Let us know, 803-563-7169. We need your predictions, and then we can compare them with the results. It's like reading your horoscope after the day. Looking at the campaign, this is one of the final weekends for Senator Lindsey Graham, one of Trump's top lieutenants, who is tasked with translating and promoting positions for Trump to do so on a Sunday news show. That's right. That's, of course, because Trump really doesn't stand message, whereas Graham, well, that is his bread and butter, though he does change. Graham was on ABC's This Week with Jonathan Karl and said this.
He was a strong leader on the things that matter the most. Whether you like him or not, that's up to you. He's not a fascist. He's not Hitler. And that shows you how desperate this campaign is. You got 3 retired generals who've been out of the game for a while, 3 weeks before the election, trying to replace joy with fear. And let me say one thing to these generals. I admire you. I respect you. But for 20 years, you were given, and others, billions of dollars to train the Iraqi and the Afghan army, and they folded like a cheap suit. How about a little self-reflection about the job you did before you criticize others?
I mean, I could go through all the good things you've said about all 3 of those.
Yeah,
men. And look, Donald Trump.
That was before they weighed in and turned America upside down.
Donald Trump
using rhetoric that's dangerous and is off base. So they decided to do this. You're the ones that want to weigh in. Okay, if you want to call him Hitler,
they didn't call him Hitler.
Well,
what they did is they
they're
warned
trying to scare
of what
Americans
they saw.
that this man can't fix the problems we need fixed. I reject that. I was there too. I was around him. I don't think he's a fascist. I thought he was a very strong president at a time we needed a strong president. I think he will be a strong president to get this country back on track, to revive our economy, to secure our border, and put out fires. They're telling you they want 4 more years of Kamala Harris and 4 more years of the same policy. To these generals, you're trying to tell America that things are good now, they're terrible now. And if she's elected based on your advice, everything goes to hell at home and abroad. So reject their advice.
Now you have been very critical of the generals, 2 of them using the word fascist. Mitch McConnell and Secretary and Speaker Johnson have been very critical, saying this is inciting violence. How dare you call Donald Trump a fascist? Let me just play you a little bit about what Donald Trump has had to say about Kamala Harris.
The true divide in American politics today is between these far-left fascists, led by Harris and her group. We have a fascist person running who's incompetent. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. This is a radical left, Marxist, communist, fascist.
So why don't you ask me, do I think Kamala Harris is a fascist? No. Do I think she's a communist? No. I think she's the most liberal person to ever be dominated by a major party. I think she's ineffective. I think she's incompetent. She's had a chance to be the border czar and failed miserably. On her watch, she advised President Biden it was a good thing to get out of Afghanistan. She has been antagonistic to giving Ukraine and Israel the military weapons.
But we can acknowledge that when it comes to the insults, they come just as strong, maybe stronger.
But you're not.
We're out of time.
You're not having Lindsey Graham call her a fascist. She's just incompetent and incapable and would be a lousy president.
Thank you, Senator Graham.
And again, that was Senator Lindsey Graham there on ABC's This Week with Jonathan Karl. Next up, this Friday, death row inmate Richard Moore is scheduled to die by lethal injection. He was convicted of murdering James Mahoney, a convenience store clerk in Spartanburg County in 1999. This execution comes after the state restarted the death penalty after a SHIELD law was passed last year, which allows officials to obtain the needed drug anonymously that they use for a lethal injection. South Carolina Public Radio's Victoria Hansen has this report.
Attorney Lindsay Vann walks down the hallway of her Columbia office, surrounded by portraits of men who've been freed from prison.
All of these men have retained a love of life.
She says their smiling faces give her hope. Van works for Justice 360, a nonprofit founded more than 30 years ago to fight for people facing the death penalty. Right now, she's facing deadlines as South Carolina resumes executions for the first time in 13 years. The state once again has a drug for lethal injection and announced in late August plans to put 6 inmates to death in a matter of months.
It's certainly a challenging place to do the work. I think that means that it's where the work needs to be done.
The state executed its first inmate, Freddie Owens, September 20th. Now the clock ticks for Richard Moore. Moore was convicted of murdering a Spartanburg convenience store clerk 25 years ago and is scheduled to die 1 week from today, November 1st.
I've represented Richard since 2014, and you can't not develop a connection.
Van and her team have twice saved Moore from dates with death. She doesn't believe he should die for his crime.
It's not a case that is typical for seeking the death penalty. He was unarmed when he went into the store.
Prosecutors said Moore murdered clerk James Mahoney during a robbery. Van insists Moore did not intend to kill the clerk, but had to defend himself when Mahoney pulled out not one, but 2 guns. She says the death penalty was sought after a contentious solicitor's race in which the candidates touted being tough on crime. The new solicitor, she says, struck qualified black jurors during trial, which means Moore, who is black, was convicted of murdering a white man without a jury of his peers. Van has filed an appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court. We spoke with Moore's son by phone.
Hello?
Lyndall Moore lives in Michigan and says he doesn't want to lose his dad.
He's not a monster. He's not someone who deserved the sentence that he got.
He plans to visit his father this weekend as he holds on to hope the Supreme Court or perhaps the governor will reconsider the case.
And really just understand it and really look through it and not be content with just allowing it to go forward.
Van had sought to have someone other than Governor Henry McMaster decide clemency, arguing he couldn't be fair because he told the media 2 years ago he would not commute Moore's sentence. Last week, a federal judge denied the request, as Governor McMaster maintained he has not made up his mind.
I really don't decide until we get right to the end.
The governor says resuming executions is long overdue, as they provide closure for victims' families. Mahoney's family hasn't spoken much with the media, but has commented on Justice 360's Facebook page, saying, quote, "Justice is not subjecting victims to relive the trauma over and over in appeals." John Bloom, who founded Justice 360, sees justice differently.
The truth is, if this case happened today, no prosecutor anywhere in the state would seek the death penalty.
Bloom calls Moore's case a relic of the past, a time when politicians boasted about the death penalty, and black men were routinely convicted by all-white juries. He says mistakes were made in Moore's case, but he knows what Van may soon face. Moore has asked her to be a witness if he's executed.
Witnessing that, you're never going to completely get over that.
Van tugs at a silver cross around her neck as she admits she's never seen an execution before.
Ultimately, I just believe that no one should be alone going through something like this.
Van believes everyone should have someone on their side. It's part of the mission of Justice 360.
You can find that and more at southcarolinapublicradio.org. And some quick additional news. 2 South Carolina men pleaded guilty in U.S. District Court in Columbia a week ago to federal hate crime and other charges in connection with a string of racially motivated armed robberies targeting Hispanic victims. According to court documents, beginning in January 2021 and continuing through February, Charles Antonio Clippard, 27, and Michael Joseph Knox, 29, both of Columbia, conspired to target people the defendants identified as Mexican or Hispanic at places of public accommodation like gas stations and grocery stores. After they identified these targets, the defendants would rob their victims at gunpoint. The defendants targeted their victims because of their race and national origin. U.S. Attorney Adair Ford Burroughs for the District of South Carolina said, quote, "While these defendants sparked fear for an entire community by targeting members of our Hispanic community, today's hearing sends a louder message. We will not tolerate bias-based crimes in South Carolina. The Justice Department will continue to relentlessly protect and enforce the civil rights of everyone in South Carolina," quote. Now, the defendants face a mandatory minimum penalty of 14 years in prison for the firearms offenses, a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison on each hate crime count, and a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison on the carjacking count. So these plea agreements would also require these defendants to pay restitution to all victims. A federal district court judge will determine any sentence after considering the U.S. sentencing guidelines and other statutory factors. That's from the Department of Justice there. So, again, we do not have a state hate crimes law on our books, but there is a federal one that you just heard in action. Welcome to the wind down section, our little break from the news. We're glad you're here, A.T. Shire, lead producer.
Yes.
You're here too.
Keep finishing that
I
sentence.
can't wait to I'm glad to see you.
Thank you so
much.
glad.
A week out. We got a week out, baby.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting
it's
close.
almost over, and in this tumultuous time, Gavin, I have something completely different to talk about right here, okay? Real quick. So some people might call it the song of the summer. I'm a little late to the party, but I just heard espresso for the first time.
Stop it. What?
I just heard it for the first time.
Are you sure? Like, you don't think you've ever heard it in the background during any number of events this summer? And
No.
You had a kid. You were busy this summer.
I've been busy, but I've had my head buried in the sand, arena-shaped hole in the sand. I heard it for the first time, and not even the whole thing, just like the main bit, okay?
The espresso.
And I gotta say, it's a boring song.
No, it's demure.
There's nothing to it, you know? And not that it offended me, it sounded bad. It sounded almost nothing to me, right? But my music school teaching sensibilities were very offended. By the simplicity of this thing.
That's this generation.
It's tough.
It's seductive, I will say. It took a minute for me to get into it because I remember someone
'cause
told me
it's
at the
it's
beginning,
boring.
they're like, oh, this is going to be the song of the summer. I'm like, and I hadn't even heard of Sabrina Carpenter until this song came out pretty much. But she has some other bops that are really fun. It's more just like sassy, cool summertime with Sabrina.
I don't know. To me,
you got to watch the music video too.
It is the sound of the algorithm at work. The dumbing down our music. And I know this makes me sound old.
I know this makes me sound old. I'm going to say it anyway.
But get off my lawn. I'm going to saber rattle here. Okay. I do think there is something to music, like challenging you a little bit and giving you maybe something that tricks your ear or surprises you ever. But like, it goes by so quick, this song, because there's nothing. The bop. Saying it's a bop is doing a heavy lift here, okay? It's just you say it and then everyone goes, agreed, demure.
I'm gonna use one of her lyrics against you here.
Okay, yeah, hit me with it.
I can't relate to desperation. My give up F's are on vacation.
Mm-hmm,
So I'm going to apply that to that argument. Mm-hmm. And then that's going to be my final.
I'm fine with the message. Like, it didn't...
It's the fun little lyrics, I think, that they're trying to get into, and everyone's being like...
It didn't sound bad to me, but like the whole time I was waiting, I was like, okay, so when's it going to start? You know what I mean?
That's at me espresso.
And then it just didn't. And it made me depressed. It made me sad. It left me wanting more.
It is that and the Charlie XCX, and then who, I guess Taylor, I don't know. Was there
Chapel Roan.
Oh my God. Oh my God, guys, please don't call. I didn't mean that. But those are the girls of the summer, right? So that was the trinity right there. So I think between all of them, there's multiple songs of summer right there. Right? We had a little Brat Summer, and this is part of being Brat.
I didn't hear any Charlie XCX. I didn't hear any Chapel Roan. I would fast forward through that part of SNL very quickly. So I don't know what that sounds like.
I'm only learning about this music because they're performing on SNL.
If this is what this song sounds like, it's a real dearth of musical ideas.
Brother, I cannot wait to fast forward, 13 years maybe?
Less.
And we're still going to be doing the podcast, of course, with your support.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about Rena's favorite song.
Shredding Gavin and I.
Oh my God, I can't wait till she can talk and we're going to have her on.
Oh,
my God.
Yeah, she's the best. I will accept her musical tastes. Don't worry, I will. I'm not going to turn into an old man who only likes Steely Dan, I promise you.
We're going to need her to keep us relevant for whatever generation's going to be
she's going to
causing all the problems then.
Roll us.
Oh my God.
She's going to kill us.
And we're going to love it. We're going to love her.
Shop us
she's
off
so
at the
good.
knees. Oh, she's the best. She's the best. All right. That's it for today, guys.
Oh, love it.
All right.
Okay, that's that Mia Espresso. I'm working late because I'm a singer. That's part of the lyrics, the fun lyrics that AT doesn't like. That's okay. Everyone has their differences here.
Lyrics are fine. The lyrics are fine. They're just boring.
They're seductive. Leave us a message. Let us know what your favorite song of the summer was. And if you have any comments on Mia Espresso, 803-563-7169. And of course, you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And you can stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lead is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. You ready?
Oh, yeah, baby.